For many of us, we might be done with the pandemic, but as a society, this pandemic is not done with us. Black women are 4 times more likely to be forced back into the office full time.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
The Southern Poverty Law Center was founded in 1971 to ensure that the promise of the civil rights movement became a reality for everybody. In 2019, the staff of the Southern Poverty Law Center won union recognition by a vote of 142 to 45. The bargaining unit encompasses staffers across the 11 SPLC offices in 5 states: Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Washington, D.C. This was after the SPLC refused voluntary recognition of the staff union after they proved their majority with authorization cards. They began bargaining in November of 2020. They staged a one-day protest almost exactly 1 month ago about the SPLC's discriminatory implementation of their return to work policy. Black women are 4 times more likely to be denied telework and remote work opportunities than white women, and 7 times more likely to be denied those opportunities than white men. They spoke to friend of the show Maximilian Alvarez on his podcast Working People about just that. Let's see what they had to say.
So management has broken our remote and telework out into 3 categories. A distant remote, which means you can move anywhere around the country, and management will cover all of your expenses if you have to come to the office. There's also a local remote designation. This designation has been awarded to pretty much the whole legal department, the whole comms department, some members of finance, and that designation is different from the distant remote because in that the employees are responsible for their expenses if they have to come into the office, and they can move anywhere they want to. At least that's what management said in the beginning. They're trying to change course now, but the employee is responsible for their expenses. And then there's a telework designation, which has been awarded, oddly enough, to women of color. And that telework designation is they have to come into the office 3 days a week, 2 days where they get to work remotely. But as a last minute game changer, Margaret said, "Oh, you have to be here Tuesday and Wednesday." We're still in the middle of a pandemic. I thought we were trying to reduce the number of people in the building at one time. So we have 3 layers. So that first distant remote layer I mentioned, guess who's been awarded that level? All executives, all make 6 figures. And the company is paying for their expenses. Let me back that up. The donors are paying for their expenses. And you move down to the next level, local remote, all line staff, attorneys, people in comms, but they're responsible for their expenses. Have you seen the gas prices recently? They're insane. Yet this organization is holding all the line staff responsible for all their travel. And they can move wherever they want, but they want them to fly in at a minute's notice with gas prices and allied prices through the roof. And then the telework designation you have for women and women of color. And that designation has the least flexibility and restrictive. And then you have the other designation. You just come to work and we just watch you every day. So there are these different levels. And if you notice what I'm saying, the ones that have the most resources spend the least. Matter of fact, they spend the most of the donor money that comes into the organization, which they say they're so concerned about. At the bottom of the pool, the lowest paid workers incur the most expenses. They're already underpaid, but the organization is costing them even more money because now I have to get up, drive my car to this organization with the high gas prices, or I'm gonna force an employee from across the country to come into the office, fly into the state, and come into the office. For what? The disparity goes on and on. It's not just racial or gender roles. We're also talking about paternalistic. We're talking about, classism. The disparities go on and on and on. They're endless.
ago, they staged a one-day demonstration in protest of those policies, so we wanted to follow up with them. We wanted to follow up on their chat with Max on working people, so we brought another member of the union on to our show. Esteban Gil is a union steward with the SPLC union. Esteban, thanks so much for coming on the Valley Labor Report.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So let's just jump right into it. Y'all held an informational picket because of those discriminatory and unfair telework policies. How are we doing on that right now?
Well, I just looked at in preparing for this interview. I looked up some numbers. Right, we've got 40 to 50,000 new COVID cases a day in the United States and 300 deaths a day in the United States. For many of us, we might be done with the pandemic, but as a society, this pandemic is not done with us. Many of our, and Lisa covered it, you covered it already. Black women are 4 times more likely to be forced back into the office full time, or at least part time. Now, I'm working from the office 3 days a week, but that works for me. That's okay. I'm a single guy. I don't have kids who can't get vaccinated at home. I don't have elderly folks or sick folks that I take care of. Unfortunately, many of my colleagues do. And many of my colleagues are coming to work today with the fear that they're going to get sick or they're going to take sickness back to their loved ones. And that's why we were out on the streets last month. And unfortunately, we've won some flexibility now. Management's not as keen to force us in on specific days of the week, and we are preparing to counter in negotiations with a remote work policy that gives us flexibility. Flexibility is the future for people who are working in offices. As my comrade Lisa had said, this is the 21st century. There's no reason for people to be, forced into a cubicle farm to get their jobs done. And it's just a part of our overall message here to the community, to SPLC, that you got to practice what you preach. SPLC's vision is as a catalyst, or mission is as a catalyst for racial justice in the South, working in partnership with communities to dismantle white supremacy, to strengthen intersectional movements and advance human rights for all. The vision is a world in which everyone can thrive, and that the ideals of equity, justice, and liberation are a reality for all. And our point is that we cannot successfully do that externally if we're not doing that internally. And unfortunately, our management hasn't seen it that way. So that's why we are here talking to the community. We are out on the streets. We are in our workplace, letting the world know to call on SPLC to practice what they preach. This is an organization that has $500 to $600 million endowment. That's bigger than many colleges and universities. We pulled in over the last 2 years, working 100% remotely, $230 million in revenue, about $28 million in net income, so after expenses. And we're looking at a reality now that we've got executives at our organization who make 10, 12 times more than the lowest paid employee, in a world where inflation is now coming up to 8.5%. Anybody out there who's organizing for higher wages, better working conditions, if you're not making a 9% pay raise this year, it's a pay cut effectively.
Right. So, and, you mentioned the disparity, and 10, 12 times as much as the median workers is that's a little bit better than some people have, but that's still a lot. And like Lisa mentioned on Max's program, those are the folks that are getting the most lenient and the most costly telework options, because they're being allowed to telework 100% from anywhere in the country, and then on the SPLC's dime, flying them in whenever they're needed in the office. Whereas the rest of everybody else, the folks down on the lower on the rung, they have more restrictive telework policies, and they're responsible for getting into the office themselves. I mean, it's ludicrous. It doesn't make any sense.
What we've learned in our struggle here at SPLC in the last 2 or 3 years since we unionized is that even folks, and I think people in the nonprofit industrial complex generally understand this, that even folks doing work trying to better society, a boss is a boss. And, I don't understand it. We haven't been able to see the logic in some of the arguments that we get at the bargaining table or from management. It is nonsensical. As far as we can tell, it's about control. It's about wanting to watch your workers. And, we're struggling to understand it too. We worked the last 2 years perfectly fine, everybody working from home. Some of us really liked that. Some of us really didn't. Now, I'm glad to be back in the office personally. But the issue and the demand is for flexibility. What works for me doesn't work for everybody. And, it's easy to say, well, this isn't a big deal when, you're at your second house and you're making a lot of money. But it's a big deal when you're making $35,000 to $40,000 a year. And now suddenly you've got to pay for gas every day again. You've got to worry about getting your kids or your grandparents sick.
Right. And bottom line, since that action a month ago, there's been some amount of flexibility, but not much. How much are we talking, or is that, is it just kind of on a case by case basis? If there's like a really pressing concern, then maybe there's some leniency, but there's been no official policy change.
Well, my advice to people out there organizing their own workplaces is the same. Things are working on a case-by-case basis. We have a fairly vocal, strong, and organized union, so we go to bat for each other, both in a sense of sort of a service model, but also organizing. And we call out management when we see inequity. Some things have been addressed, but really we're gearing up for continuing to bargain. And the biggest thing that it did is that now management is inclined to talk more to get this contract resolved. We've been bargaining since November of 2020 for our very first contract, doing about 2 hours a week in bargaining. And now suddenly we're scheduling full days bargaining sessions because management knows that the community sees this and that they need to treat us fairly, and we need to get a contract wrapped up sooner rather than later.
Yeah, bargaining for a year and a half. I mentioned that since November of 2020. That's Looney Tunes for an organization like the Southern Poverty Law Center. I mean, the United Launch Alliance here in Decatur, we've got a lot of knowledge on that because David, the current president of that local there, he was formerly the co-host on this program, and we're still really close. And we talk about them on the show a lot. ULA is not a friendly organization to its union, but I mean, even just just to get it over with, they set aside 4 weeks of bargaining right before the contract goes up. The contract expires in May the 1st, and so they set up April to bargain. They set up 4 weeks to bargain. They did it every day, and then bam, they're done. They're done with bargaining now. Members are reviewing the contract, and they're going to vote on it. And why would the SPLC do anything different than? I mean, what do you see as the reason for pulling out bargaining for a year and a half? I mean, it shouldn't take that long.
It absolutely shouldn't. We've been demanding more time for bargaining. We've been demanding more off time for union organizers to research proposals, to study things, to get feedback from our unit, to come up with counter proposals. This last action, we believe, has done a lot to push us back to the table to increase bargaining time. And yeah, we would love 4 weeks set aside for us to sit down together 8 hours a day and figure it out. We're lucky to organize with the Washington Baltimore News Guild. which is traditionally a newspaper union, but they thoroughly believe in member democracy. So it's worker organizers doing the negotiating, making the decisions, interacting with our bargaining unit, not paid staff. This is what we do on our off time. We meet Monday nights, we meet Tuesday nights, we meet Wednesday nights, Mm-hmm. Like I said before, this is a class struggle. And even within the nonprofit social justice sphere of things, management, especially upper management, occupy a class and have interests that are not in line with their workers. And also these things are complicated. We, this is many of us first time ever in a union, both for us and for management, right? And also we organized 2 months before the pandemic hit. So that's caused some delays as well. Trying to organize a union via Zoom is not optimal.
Right.
But here we are. Now we're making some noise out in public. We're coming to the community, and we hope that leads to more bargaining so we can wrap this contract up and get the best deal that we can, out of an organization that has the resources to practice its values internally as well as externally, and pay us all enough to thrive and hire enough of us to where we're not fueling this cycle of burnout that we have here at SPLC and in the nonprofit sector generally.
Right. When we spoke yesterday, while we're talking about bargaining, I wanted to talk about this. Open bargaining is something that we've talked about with some amount of frequency on the program, and you mentioned that y'all do that. Y'all's bargaining sessions are open, and this was pretty astounding to me. You said that every session you get 100+ members watching out of your approximately 200-member bargaining unit. What does that do for your... Well, firstly, in Max's talk with Lisa and Katie, Lisa said that management is still trying to act like the union is just like a minority interest in the bargaining unit, which is bonkers to me because they're seeing 100 people in these bargaining sessions. I don't know how they have that opinion still, but what does having the open bargaining sessions and so many people actually seeing y'all bargain with management, what is that doing for your negotiating position? Well,
for one, it holds everybody accountable. It holds us as representatives of our fellow workers accountable to them. And it makes sure, and management knows that they're being watched. And also, I will say, management's intransigence at the bargaining table, they're our best recruiters. Right? So folks who were on the fence about being active in the union, or folks who don't understand what unions do, they watch bargaining, they watch what we say as negotiators, and they watch what the bosses say as negotiators. And, that gets them activated. It gets them upset when bosses say things
when they see what the boss
make
thinks
you feel
about.
Undignified. Exactly. We wouldn't do it any other way. Our colleagues, I work with some of the best people I've ever worked with here at the center. And they are, ready to throw down and ready to do what needs to be done to get the best contract possible. And open bargaining is, yes, I wouldn't do it any other way.
Yeah, that's awesome. The last thing that I wanted to ask, and Adam, I'll throw it to you if you have anything after this. But you talked about the nonprofit sector generally, and the nonprofit sector we've had a couple of guests on about that, and the specific type of exploitation that nonprofit workers get, and how a lot of folks are starting to, for the first time, fight back against that. Can you talk a little to that?
Sure. The nonprofit industrial complex is an industrial complex. It's an industry. There's a lot of money in it. And there is a certain reliance on the fact that people who are trying to do this work are dedicated because they are fighting for a cause. We are fighting to better this world. Here at SPLC, we're calling for economic justice. We're suing over prison conditions. We're investigating and suing hate groups and people who will do us and our community serious harm if they're allowed to do if they're allowed any more lenience to do what they're doing, right? So people love that work. They're driven to do this, both because we need to pay rent, but we want to see a better world. And this is across the field. People get burnt out. They're understaffed. They're working long hours. They're working unpaid hours. That's what I hope folks listening on this, if you're at a nonprofit and you're tired and you're sick and tired of what's going on at your workplace, is, the easy solution is to quit and find something else. And you can probably even go into the for-profit sector and make a lot more money. But the long-term solution to this is to organize your own workplace. It's easy to quit. It's very hard to organize, but in the long term, we're all better off as a sector and as a society if all of our nonprofits are organizing, are unionized, and are ready to fight for what they're worth. Yeah.
Adam, you said you had a question?
Yeah, Esteban, first of all, I want to say thank you for your efforts, and really what you just said about the nonprofit industry very much resonates, and I'm sure resonates with some of our listeners. But I just wanted to, on a personal note, if you would tell us a little bit about the work that you do, and what has having a union and being there to start a union, as you mentioned very recently, what has that meant to you?
Well, I work in criminal justice reform as a program associate. So I do administrative, logistical, and research support for a legal team across the South. In terms of, you kind of had a multi-part question. So in terms of what unionizing has done for us as a workplace, it makes managers cross their, I was going to say cross your I's and dot your T's, but dot your I's and cross your T's, and make sure that, there's an understanding that people aren't alone. They might make a mistake at work. They might be getting investigated for something. The greatest, at least for my personal interaction with being a union organizer, is when somebody comes to me with a problem at work, and the first thing that you have to let them know, and the first thing that they feel is, you're not alone. There's going to be somebody at the other end of this phone for you. We can have lunch. We can talk it out. We can figure out what we can do to make things better, either on a contractual grievance, sort of bureaucratic way, or as an organization of workers in struggle, where we stand up for each other and pressure management to do the right thing. And I come from a labor family. I see your IWW t-shirt. I'm a card-carrying IWW member as well. And that really is the future, is one in which workers as a class organize and push back and take the wealth that we deserve.
Fun fact, everybody involved in this project is an IWW member. So
nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, Esteban, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for the work that you do, both in the SPLC and the union. We really appreciate it, and let us know if we can do anything for you in the future, okay?
Absolutely. We'll be in touch.
All right. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.